Ethan had never cared much for the politics of the galaxy. As a human soldier, he spent most of his time in battle. Far from the royal halls and the glittering worlds of the galactic elite, he was not interested in wealth, power, or beauty. Had learned the hard way that those things could be empty, like the cold steel of a weapon that never saw true use. What mattered to him was honor, respect, and the truth. So when the message came to him, summons to a grand competition for the hand of Princess Lyra, he had no idea why his name had even been included. He had no status, no title, and no political connections. But somehow the invitation had found its way to his desk. The princess was known across the galaxy. Lyra was said to be the most beautiful creature to ever walk the stars. Her face, her figure, her grace, everything about her had been praised by poets and artists. But Ethan had no interest in those things. He was a soldier, a man who saw beyond appearances. Beauty was fleeting, and it could be deceptive. He had seen it before, how the most beautiful faces could hide the deepest scars. Still, the invitation had come, and it was an opportunity he couldn't ignore. He'd never been to a royal palace before, let alone been invited to compete for the heart of one of the most powerful women in the galaxy. He had never been one to back down from a challenge. Even if it seemed impossible, Ethan arrived at the palace. A vast and majestic structure that seemed to stretch endlessly toward the sky. The air smelled of fresh flowers and the faint scent of distant stars. But the beauty of the surroundings did nothing to calm the nervous flutter in his chest. He had no idea what to expect, but he had come this far, and he would face whatever came with the same resolve he had faced every battle. Inside the palace, the competition was fierce. Men and women from every corner of the galaxy had gathered, all vying for the princess's attention. They were handsome, powerful, and rich. They had everything the galaxy valued. They all spoke in honeyed words, offering compliments and gifts that glittered like stars. To Ethan, it felt like a game he had no interest in playing. As the contestants filed into the grand hall, they were all introduced to Princess Lyra. She stood at the far end of the room, her presence commanding the attention of everyone present. The crowd fell silent, gazing at her with admiration. She was indeed stunning. Her long silver hair cascaded like a waterfall, her violet eyes gleamed like twin moons, and her skin shimmered in the soft light. But Ethan's gaze was different. He didn't see the beauty everyone else saw. He saw the weight of responsibility in her eyes, the burden of being a royal, a symbol of power. He saw the quiet sadness behind her smile, the loneliness that came with being admired for something she hadn't chosen for herself. While the others were captivated by her appearance, Ethan was drawn to the person she truly was. The woman who had been shaped by forces beyond her control. When it was Ethan's turn to approach her, he didn't speak the words the others had rehearsed. He didn't compliment her beauty or try to impress her with grand gestures. Instead, he spoke from the heart. His voice steady but sincere. "I don't care about your beauty, princess," he said, his words cutting through the tension in the room. "I see you for who you are, not just what others make of you. You've been given a crown, but I imagine it weighs more than anything else. I admire your strength, your ability to carry that weight. That's what matters to me." There was a long silence. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her response. Ethan couldn't tell if he had just made the biggest mistake of his life or said something that might actually matter. But Lyra's eyes never left him, and in that moment, he saw something flicker in her expression, a glimmer of surprise, followed by something softer. It was a look of recognition, as if she had been waiting for someone to see her, not as a princess or a symbol, but as a person. For a long moment, Lyra didn't speak. The crowd around them shifted, but Ethan stood still, holding her gaze. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft but firm. "Thank you," she said. "You're the first person who hasn't tried to flatter me." Ethan smiled, relieved. "I'm not here to flatter anyone, princess. I'm here because I believe in what matters. Most truth, honor, and the strength of those who carry burdens like yours." The words seemed to settle between them, unspoken but understood. Lyra studied him for a moment longer, as if trying to decide what to make of him. Ethan wasn't sure what he expected from her, but he certainly hadn't expected this kind of reaction. He had no idea what would happen next, but something told him that his life and hers had just changed in ways neither of them could have predicted. As the rest of the contestants waited for their turn, Ethan and Lyra shared a moment of quiet understanding. The palace around them seemed to fade away, and for the first time since he'd arrived, Ethan felt like he belonged. He had spoken his truth, and it had reached her, perhaps in ways he couldn't yet understand. The competition continued, but Ethan knew that no matter the outcome, he had already chosen something far more important than a royal title or a place beside a beautiful woman. He had chosen honesty. He had chosen to see beyond the surface, and as the night wore on, he couldn't help but wonder if Lyra had chosen him too. After the competition, Lyra found herself thinking about Ethan more than she cared to admit. His words had struck her deeply, much more than the polite flattery of the other contestants. While the other suitors had tried to charm her with sweet words and expensive gifts, Ethan had seen her as more than just a beautiful face. He had seen the burden she carried as a princess, the loneliness that came with her crown. In the days that followed, Lyra couldn't shake the memory of his calm, steady voice, the way he spoke to her like an equal, not as someone to be admired from afar. Most of her life had been spent behind the walls of the royal palace, surrounded by advisors, courtiers, and people who only saw her as a symbol, never as a real person. Ethan had been the first to look at her and see her for who she truly was. It was both refreshing and frightening. But as the days passed, the weight of her responsibilities pressed on her once more. She was the heir to the throne, the future ruler of her people, and the symbol of power that held the galaxy's fragile alliances together. Her marriage was a political necessity, not a personal choice. Her advisors had already started to push her toward making a decision, choosing a suitor who could strengthen the throne, someone with power, wealth, or military might. Ethan had none of those things. He was a soldier, a simple man, with no title and no wealth. He came from a world far away from hers, a place filled with common people who didn't play the same games the galaxy's elite did. But there was something about him, something that made her feel more alive than she had in years. His honesty, his quiet strength, it was unlike anything she had ever known. One evening, as Lyra sat alone in her chambers, gazing out at the stars, she found herself lost in thought. The city below her gleamed with lights, the sound of life echoing up to her window. The weight of her crown felt heavier now, more than ever. She had been raised to believe that her duty came first, that her heart had no place in the decisions of the galaxy. Yet, after meeting Ethan, she couldn't help but question everything she had been taught. Her personal feelings seemed insignificant compared to the greater good. She had been told her entire life that her marriage would be the key to securing alliances and keeping peace in the galaxy. But Ethan was different. He didn't offer her power or alliances. He offered her something far more precious, something she had never expected, a chance to be seen for who she truly was. The decision weighed heavily on her heart. She willing to risk everything she had ever known for the chance at a life with a man who had no power, no position, and no future in the royal court? Or would she choose duty, as she had always been taught, and marry someone who could bring the power and stability her people needed? As these thoughts swirled in her mind, a soft knock interrupted her quiet contemplation. She turned to see one of her advisors, Lady Arya, standing at the door. "Your Highness," Lady Arya began, bowing respectfully. "The council is waiting. For your decision, they wish to know who you will choose." Lyra's heart sank. The council. They were the ones who had always dictated her path, telling her who she should marry, what alliances were needed, and how she should behave as a princess. She had spent her life trying to meet their expectations, trying to be the perfect heir. But now, in this moment, she felt as if she was being pulled in two directions. "I'll be there shortly." Lyra replied softly, her voice betraying none of the turmoil inside her. She needed time. She needed to think, to decide what kind of future she wanted, one dictated by duty or one that she could choose for herself. As Lady Arya left, Lyra walked to her balcony, gazing out at the stars. The galaxy was vast, and she was a small piece of it. But Ethan had made her feel as if she mattered, as if she could have a life beyond the crown and the politics. For the first time in her life, she wanted something for herself. But could she have it? The sound of footsteps behind her interrupted her thoughts. She turned to see Ethan standing in the doorway to her chambers, his presence as steady as ever. He didn't speak right away, just stood there watching her. His eyes seemed to say everything: understanding, patience, and something deeper, something Lyra couldn't quite name. "Do you regret your choice?" Lyra asked, her voice barely. Above a whisper, she needed to know. If she chose him, it would change everything: her life, her future, the galaxy's future. Was he ready for that? Ethan took a step forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "I don't regret it," he said simply. I don't regret choosing you. I chose you because you're more than what people think you are. I see the strength in you, not the crown. I see the person behind the title." His words hung in the air, heavy and honest. Lyra felt her heart skip a beat. For the first time in her life, someone had seen her for who she truly was, not as a princess, not as a symbol, but as a person. It was a gift she hadn't realized she needed until now, but the question still lingered in her mind. Could she truly choose a man who had no power, no political standing? Could she risk everything for the chance at happiness, knowing the galaxy's future depended on her choices? "You know what this means, don't you?" Lyra asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "If I choose you, I choose a life outside of everything I've known. I'll be abandoning my duty. The Council will never accept it. The galaxy will never accept it." "I'm not asking you to abandon your duty," Ethan replied, his voice steady. "I'm asking you to choose your heart. If the galaxy can't accept that, then maybe it's time to change the way things have always been." Lyra looked at him, her heart torn between her duty and her desire for a life of her own. But Ethan's words made her wonder, could she have both? Could she choose both love and duty? Or was it too much to ask? The days passed quickly in the royal palace, and Lyra's thoughts were still tangled in the decision she had to make. Ethan was unlike anyone she had ever met. He didn't try to charm her with grand gestures or empty compliments like the other suitors. Instead, he spoke from his heart, offering her a kind of honesty that was rare in her world. It made her feel seen for the first time in her life. But with every passing day, the weight of her responsibilities grew heavier. Her duty to the galaxy, to her people, and to her throne pressed down on her shoulders like a heavy crown. The council had been waiting for her decision. They had made it clear that her marriage was not just a personal choice, but a political one. The future of her kingdom, her people, and the delicate balance of power in the galaxy depended on this decision. But how could she choose someone who wasn't part of this world? Ethan was a soldier, a man who had no position in the royal court, no influence in the galaxy. He didn't belong to the circles she was expected to marry into. Yet, there was something in his eyes. Something that made her question everything she had been taught. The news of Lyra's growing connection with Ethan hadn't gone unnoticed. Whispers had spread through the palace, reaching the ears of her advisors, her family, and even the other suitors. The other contestants had begun to grow anxious, aware that their chances were slipping away. But it wasn't just the other suitors who were concerned. The council, the powerful body of leaders that advised Lyra and her family, taken note of her growing interest in the human soldier. The leader of the council, Lord Varen, a stern and calculating figure, was the first to approach Lyra with his concerns. "Princess," he said one evening as they walked through the palace gardens, the night sky stretching above them, "I have heard troubling things. You have spent more time with that human soldier than with any of the other suitors. Is this wise?" Lyra stopped walking, her gaze fixed on the stars above. She knew what Lord Varen was implying. Ethan was a threat to the carefully laid plans the council had for her future. A man with no title, no alliances, no wealth, he could never be the match she needed. He was an outsider, and the council feared what his presence could mean for their power. "He is different," Lyra said softly, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "He doesn't care for power or wealth. He cares for something else, something more. Lord Varen's expression hardened, his tone sharp. Princess, you must understand. This is not a matter of what you want. This is a matter of what is best for the kingdom. The future of our people depends on your union. Your heart cannot be the deciding factor. This is a political marriage. Lyra's heart sank. She had known this truth for years, but hearing it spoken so plainly made it feel even more real. She was not allowed to follow her heart. Her duty was clear, and it demanded a union with someone who could strengthen the throne. Ethan could never be that person. I understand my duty, Lord Varen, Lyra replied, her voice steady but filled with inner turmoil. But I also understand my heart. It has been a long time since I felt truly seen. Ethan sees me for who I am, not for the crown I wear or the title I hold. Lord Varen's eyes narrowed. That may be true, Princess, but the galaxy does not care for feelings. It cares for strength and stability. Ethan is neither strong nor stable. He is a soldier, a man without connections. Your heart may wish for him, but your duty demands more. You must choose wisely. The words stung, but Lyra remained silent, her mind racing with the weight of her decision. She had never been allowed to make a choice like this before. Her life had always been planned for her, shaped by the expectations of the council, her family, and the galaxy. But Ethan had given her a glimpse of something else, a life where she could choose for herself. A life where she didn't have to be the perfect princess. That evening, after the conversation with Lord Varen, Lyra found herself in her chambers, alone with her thoughts. She had been raised to believe that her choices didn't matter, that she was nothing more than a pawn in a larger game. But Ethan had made her feel like she was more than that. He had made her feel like she had a voice, like her opinions, her desires, her heart mattered. She didn't want to be a pawn anymore. She wanted to be her own person. But could she have both? Could she have the love she had found in Ethan and the duty she had been born to? The sound of a soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. She stood, walking to the door, her heart pounding in her chest. When she opened it, there stood Ethan, his familiar, steady presence calming her nerves. "I was hoping to see you," he said quietly, his eyes soft as they met hers. "Can we talk?" Lyra nodded, stepping aside to allow him into her chambers. She didn't know what to say, but she knew she needed to hear what he had to say. She needed to know if he was ready for what would come next. As they sat together, Ethan turned to her, his expression serious. "I know the choice you're facing is difficult," he said, his voice low. "But I need you to know something. I didn't choose you because of your beauty or your title. I chose you because I believe in who you are, not what you represent." Lyra felt her heart race. Ethan had always been honest with her, and his words now filled her with a mixture of hope and fear. "I don't know if I can choose you," she admitted softly. My duty says I can't." "I know," Ethan replied, his tone gentle but firm. "But you don't have to choose between us, Lyra. You can choose yourself, and that's what matters most." Her eyes met his, and for the first time, she felt the weight of her responsibilities lighten, even if just for a moment. Ethan was offering her something she had never thought possible, the chance to choose herself. The peaceful days of the royal palace seemed to be slipping away as the political landscape around Lyra grew more tense. Word had spread throughout the galaxy about the princess's growing connection with Ethan, the soldier from a far-off world. Her advisors, the council, and even her family were beginning to pressure her, urging her to make a decision. The more she resisted, the more the tension seemed to rise. But the galaxy was changing. There were whispers of a new war brewing, one that had the potential to shift the balance of power across the stars. For years, factions had been on the edge of conflict, and now that simmering tension was boiling over. The powerful empires of the galaxy were gathering their forces, preparing for a war that could destroy entire civilizations. Lyra could feel it in the air, the heavy weight of impending disaster. The council pushed her harder to make a decision, reminding her that her marriage could be the key to securing peace or provoking war. They insisted that she marry someone of influence, someone who could solidify alliances. Ethan, with his simple soldier's life and lack of political power, was the last person the council wanted for her. They didn't care about love or personal connections. They cared about what was best for their power. As Lyra sat in her chambers, the weight of her choices pressing down on her, she received an urgent message from Lord Varen, the leader of the council. "The situation is worsening, Princess." Lord Varen's voice crackled through the communicator. "We need you to make a choice, and we need it now. If we don't act soon, we will lose everything. The war is coming, and we need a strong alliance to stand with us." Lyra felt her heart racing. Ethan had already become her heart's choice, but she couldn't ignore the reality of her position. If she chose Ethan, the galaxy might see it as a weakness. She was supposed to unite, not divide. Her duty as the heir to the throne is to keep the peace, not to follow her heart. Later that night, as the stars twinkled above the palace, Lyra found herself standing on the balcony, gazing out at the vastness of space, the galaxy, with all its beauty and danger stretched before her. She longed for a life where she could simply choose what made her happy, but those dreams seemed impossible in the face of everything she had been raised to do. The soft sound of footsteps behind her pulled her from her thoughts. She turned to see Ethan standing in the doorway, his figure framed by the light from the hallway. His presence brought a calm she hadn't felt in days. "I know you're thinking about it," Ethan said, his voice quiet but firm. "About the war, about your duty. I know it's tearing you apart." Lyra nodded, her eyes searching the stars. I feel like I'm being pulled in two directions," she confessed. "My heart says one thing, but my duty says another. If I choose you, Ethan, the galaxy might never forgive me. If I choose what's expected of me, I might never be truly happy." Ethan stepped closer, his gaze steady. "I understand, Lyra, but you don't have to carry the weight of the galaxy on your own. I may not be from a powerful family, but I know what it means to fight for something that matters. What matters to me is you." Her heart fluttered at his words, but doubt still lingered. "The war is coming, Ethan. The council will want to act quickly. They'll push me to marry someone who can help us form strong alliances, someone with power. If I choose you, everything could change. I'll be seen as weak. The galaxy might see it that way, but it doesn't matter," Ethan said. "What matters is that you make the decision that's right for you. The war will happen whether you choose me or not. But together, we might be able to make a difference. If we fight for each other, we can change the course of this galaxy." Lyra felt her chest tighten. Could it really be that simple? Could she follow her heart and still fight for the galaxy? Could she choose Ethan without condemning everything she had ever known? For the first time in days, Lyra felt a spark of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, there was a way to have both, to follow her heart and still protect the galaxy she had sworn to defend. As the conversation continued, news came that the war was no longer just a distant threat. The first battle had begun. The galaxy had been plunged into chaos. The next few days passed in a blur. The palace was filled with activity as military leaders met, preparing for the battles ahead. Lyra sat in on the meetings, her thoughts drifting to Ethan. As much as she wanted to remain focused on the war, her heart kept pulling her back to him. He was right, she didn't have to face everything alone. But could she really bring him into the heart of this conflict? As Lyra walked through the palace, her mind racing, she caught sight of Lord Varen speaking with other advisors. They were discussing strategy, alliances, and the future of the galaxy. The conversation grew more heated as the minutes passed. "You have to make a decision, Your Highness," Lord Varen insisted, his voice sharp with urgency. "We need your leadership. The galaxy needs your strength. Marry someone who can help us win this war, and you will be the savior of your people." Lyra's heart sank as she listened to his words. There it was again, the constant pressure to make the right choice. But was the right choice really what was best for the galaxy, or was it simply what the council wanted? That evening, she found Ethan waiting for her in her chambers. His presence was a comfort, but she could feel the weight of her decision pressing down on her. "I have to make a choice, Ethan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. but I don't know if I can live with the consequences. Ethan reached out, taking her hand in his. Whatever you decide, Lyra, I'll be by your side. We're in this together. And for the first time, Lyra felt like maybe she could be brave enough to follow her heart. But the war was already here, and the future was uncertain. Would their love be enough to change the galaxy? Only time would tell. The war was no longer a distant possibility, it had arrived. Battles raged across the galaxy, and the fate of countless worlds hung in the balance. As the conflict intensified, Lyra felt the weight of her choices more than ever. She had chosen Ethan, the soldier from a distant world, the man who had seen her for who she truly was, but in doing so, she had also chosen a path that threatened everything she had ever known. The Council had made their feelings clear. They disapproved of her choice and saw Ethan as a distraction, a symbol of weakness that could not be allowed to remain in the heart of the royal palace. But Lyra had not chosen Ethan because of his status or power. She had chosen him because of the way he made her feel. With him, she was not a princess, a symbol, or a tool of politics. She was simply herself. As the war raged on, Lyra found herself increasingly caught between her heart and her duty. She could no longer deny her love for Ethan, but every day brought new challenges. The galaxy was changing, and the people who had once supported her now viewed her with suspicion. Some believed she had betrayed her duty to the throne, while others feared that her choices would bring disaster. One evening, as she sat in her private quarters, Lord Varen entered, his face grim. He had been one of the most outspoken critics of Ethan and had repeatedly urged Lyra to reconsider her decisions. "Your Highness," Lord Varen began, his voice formal yet urgent, "the situation is growing worse. The war threatens to engulf us all. We cannot afford to wait any longer. The galaxy needs strong leadership, not romantic notions. If you continue down this path with Ethan, you will be seen as a weakness. The Council will no longer support you." Lyra stood, her chest tightening at his words. "And what do you suggest?" "Lord Varen, should I abandon everything I believe in? Should I choose a man I do not love simply because it's what the galaxy expects?" Lord Varen stiffened, but his tone softened. "Your duty is to the galaxy, Princess. If you are not able to separate your emotions from your responsibilities, the galaxy may very well fall apart. You must do what is necessary." Her heart ached as she looked at the stern man before her. Lord Varen had been like a father to her, but his vision for the future of the galaxy was one that had never left room for her personal happiness. She knew he only wanted what he believed was best for her people. But it didn't change. The truth, she could no longer ignore the person she had become because of Ethan. The next day, word came that Ethan had been called to the front lines. The war had reached a new level of intensity, and he had been chosen to lead a mission deep into enemy territory. Lyra had known this day would come, but that didn't make it any easier. She watched as Ethan prepared for the journey, the weight of his armor reflecting the weight of the battle ahead. His face was calm, but his eyes told a different story of fear, hope, and love. "Are you sure about this?" Lyra asked softly, stepping forward to stand beside him. Ethan turned to her, a faint smile on his lips. "I don't have a choice, Lyra. The galaxy needs us. But I promise you this, I'll return. No matter what happens, I'll come back to you." Her heart clenched at his words, but she couldn't let him see the fear in her eyes. "I know," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "But be careful, please." "I will be," Ethan replied, taking her hand in his. "And I'll come back to you, I promise." The reality of the war, the loss, and the uncertainty that lay ahead weighed down on her heart. She had chosen Ethan, despite the expectations, but now she wasn't sure if it was enough. The war wasn't just a battle of armies, it was a battle for the soul of the galaxy. And Lyra was right in the center of it. As the days passed without word from the front lines, Lyra found herself growing restless. The palace was filled with the constant hum of war officials, messengers, and military leaders moving in and out, all focused on strategy and the next move. But none of that mattered to her. What mattered was Ethan, and the fear that she might never see him again. Then one day a message arrived. Ethan had been injured in battle. The message was vague, but it was enough to make Lyra's heart race. She wasted no time, leaving her chambers and rushing to the war room to find out more. There she found Lord Varen, who was speaking with the general in charge of the mission. Princess. "We've received word that Ethan was injured during the mission," the general said, his voice grave. "He was wounded, but we've managed to stabilize him. He's being brought back to the palace for medical care." Lyra let out a breath she didn't know she had been holding. "Can I see him?" "Of course," the general replied, "but he'll need time to recover. We'll take care of him." As Lyra made her way to the medical wing, she felt a wave of relief and anxiety wash over her. Ethan was alive. But for how long? The war had already claimed so many lives, and she feared it would claim his as well. When she finally reached him, she found Ethan lying on a medical bed, his body bruised and bandaged. His eyes were closed, but his chest rose and fell. Steadily, seeing him like this, vulnerable and hurt, made her heart ache in a way she had never known before. She sat by his side, taking his hand in hers, and quietly whispered, "I'm here, Ethan. I'm right here." Hours passed, and finally Ethan woke, his eyes fluttering open to find her there. His smile was weak, but it was enough to melt the fear in her heart. "I told you I'd come back," he whispered, his voice hoarse but filled with warmth. "I promised." Lyra smiled through her tears, squeezing his hand gently. "You did," she said softly, "and you're here. All that matters." In that moment, surrounded by the uncertainty of war and the weight of the galaxy's future, Lyra knew one thing for certain. He had chosen Ethan because he was the one who had truly seen her, who had made her feel more than just a royal figure. And now, more than ever, she knew that their love could be the key to changing the galaxy. But the road ahead would be long and uncertain, and the war was far from over. Would their love be strong enough to survive it? Only time would tell. The war had dragged on longer than anyone had hoped. The battles were fierce, and the galaxy was torn between those who fought for power and those who fought for peace. But through all the chaos, Lyra and Ethan remained determined. Their bond had been tested in ways they never imagined, and each day brought new challenges. Yet, they faced it all together. The medical team had worked tirelessly to heal Ethan, and after weeks of recovery, he was finally strong enough to leave the medical wing. The war was still raging, but for the first time in a long while, Lyra allowed herself a moment of peace. The weight of the galaxy's expectations still pressed on her shoulders, but now she had someone who stood beside her, a partner in every sense of the word. It was in the quiet moments, between the meetings, and the war reports that Lyra found solace. Ethan's presence was a steadying force. He didn't need to be a ruler, a general, or a king. He was just Ethan, the man who had chosen her not for her title or her beauty, but for the person she truly was. And that was enough. One evening, as they sat together in the royal gardens, the sound of distant explosions echoed across the stars. The war was never far away, but for now, they had each other. "Do you ever think about what comes after this?" Lyra asked, her voice soft as she gazed out at the stars. Ethan turned to her, his eyes filled with a quiet understanding. "The time," he said. "I think about how we can build something better, something more than just power and politics. We've seen how broken the galaxy can be, but maybe we can change that together." Lyra smiled at him, her heart swelling with hope. She had spent so much of her life focused on what she was expected to do, on what the galaxy needed from her. But now, with Ethan, she felt a sense of purpose that was her own. They had already defied expectations. They had already proven that love could be stronger than any title, stronger than any alliance. "The galaxy has always seen me as a symbol," Lyra continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "But with you, I can be more than that, can be who I was always meant to be." Ethan reached out, gently taking her hand in his. "And I'll be with you every step of the way. We'll fight for a future where we can choose our own path." The weight of her duty had not disappeared, but for the first time in her life, Lyra realized that her duty didn't have to define her. She could choose a new way forward, one that didn't require her to sacrifice everything for the sake of power. And Ethan would be there, by her side. As they faced whatever challenges the galaxy still had in store, news of Lyra and Ethan's bond had spread throughout the galaxy. Some saw them as a beacon of hope, a symbol of what could be achieved when people set aside their differences and worked together. Others, however, saw their union as a threat, a challenge to the old ways of doing things. Council had not been pleased with the turn of events, but they had no choice but to accept the reality that Lyra had made her choice. And for better or for worse, that choice was Ethan. The galaxy watched as they made their first joint decision to move forward with a plan that would not only end the war, but also create a new foundation for peace. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a step toward something better. It was a chance to rebuild, and it was Ethan who stood by her side, offering his strength, his support, and his love. Together, they began to speak to the leaders of the galaxy, offering a new vision for the future, one where alliances weren't built on power and control, but on trust and mutual respect. Lyra's people, once divided by fear and uncertainty, began to see the truth in what she and Ethan were offering. The war was not over, but there was a new hope in the air. Leaders who had once opposed her began to listen. And for the first time in years, Lyra felt like she was not just the future of her people, but a part of something bigger, a movement that could change the galaxy for good. As the peace talks continued, Ethan remained a constant presence by her side. His quiet strength and his unwavering support helped her through the toughest moments. No longer was she just a princess expected to conform to the rules of a broken system. She was a woman, a leader, and someone who had found love in the most unexpected of places. The days ahead would not be easy. The galaxy was still recovering from the war, and there were many obstacles left to face. But Lyra and Ethan had proven that, together, they could overcome anything. They had already fought for each other, and now they would fight for a galaxy that could be better. A galaxy where love, hope, and unity were more powerful than the old ways of power and control. In time, their story became a legend. Story of how a soldier from a distant world had chosen a princess. Not for her beauty or her crown, but for the person she truly was. And how together, they changed the galaxy. Lyra and Ethan's love was a reminder to the galaxy that sometimes the most powerful force was not an army or a weapon, but the bond between two people who were willing to stand together, no matter the cost. The galaxy would never forget the way they had chosen each other. And in that choice, they had chosen the future of the galaxy.